Miss Xolelwa Kashekatia, all of our people and institutions that have taken time to reflect on what it would take to turn our country around, and by extension our continent. All of us who have decided to come and support this exercise, I greet you all. I was in Cape Town earlier today. I only left in the afternoon. And at some point, I switched to channel 404. And I saw my sister, Xolelwa, sharing some reflections on what Indlulamithi was all about. Unfortunately, it was almost at the time, but there is something she said or something that appeared to be attributed to her that I picked up which struck me, and it was seeking a better South Africa. So the few reflections that I'm going to share are, among others, governance. Any country and any institution that has made meaningful progress owes that progress to the leadership it has. If you have a leader whose vision rises far above the trees, like a giraffe, then you're going somewhere. But only in a positive sense, because some of these visions really do rise above the highest of trees in the most destructive way. Think about it. Think of any country or about any country that has made admirable progress in the area of governance, in the economic and social sector. There's a leader attached to that progress. Excited, I think it was last year or year before, having visited China for the first time, I had a meeting with our current president, and I just couldn't stop talking about my experience in China, because the picture that I had before I went there was of a hopeless country of directionless people who do nothing but oppress their people, and there's nothing good that you can learn from them. So I was impressed. And he said to me, Deng Xiaoping. I said, who is that? He says, that's the leader who was treated unfairly by Mao Zedong, although they initially worked together. But during his exile, he spent quality time doing what those involved in this exercise are doing, reflecting on the different scenarios that would facilitate progress and good governance in every sphere of life in China. So if there be anything fundamentally good in China today, you would be told it is not so much about what Mao Zedong did. He laid some solid foundation, solidified the party, but the visionary leader to be emulated is Deng Xiaoping. I wasn't surprised, therefore, to learn from the media that our president is busy reading his book written by, is it Vogel or Vogel? Pardon my pronunciation. Think about that, whether it's Singapore, whether it is South Korea, wheresoever meaningful progress has been recorded. It's all about sound leadership and good governance. Which brings me to the next point. I've realized that it really isn't that difficult to win an election and become a president, because of the factors that facilitate a successful electoral campaign. It largely depends on the kind of structure you have in place and who you are connected to, how deep their pockets are. You can become a successful toy that is catapulted into a serious leadership position, depending on who you are linked to, which means something needs to be done about determining who is qualified to even run for office in the first place. Because if a number of these successful countries, not all of them, screen first who is allowed to contest for a high leadership position. Only thereafter can you begin to amass the necessary resources to contest for that position when your capacity for leadership has been tested and proven. Meaning, in a South African context, where the inequalities you have so well highlighted are a reality that is going to be with us for a very long time to come, I think we need to begin to reflect on whether people should be funded by individuals and companies, or whether we should do it differently. I think maybe we should interrogate the possibility of the state itself funding those identified through a proper selection criteria without being unduly discriminatory. Have a decent budget for that all-important project, because, one, elections don't come every year. Even if it were to cost billions to fund those that are going to be players in the electoral process, be it local government, national or provincial, it is a sacrifice worth making for the sake of the good governance that our country cries out for. So if you were to budget, say what? I don't know whether it would cost 5 or 10 billion to do that once in a while, just so that people don't get their confidence or trust secured behind closed doors. They get in here, wonderful promises, none of them are implemented, and you're surprised, but what happened? He's not allowed to, or she is not allowed to. I keep on saying, we've got to be very careful. Abraham Lincoln defined democracy as a government of the people, and by the people and for the people, but if care is not taken, it will soon be, and I know it offends many, it will soon be a government of the rich, by the rich and for the rich. And there's got to be a remedy identified for that possibility that could exclude many capable leaders who would help us to get to where we want to be. One of the things that you've touched on in your work is social solidarity and sacrifice as a central value that could be embraced by South African society. And I think we should, because where greed is allowed to run wild, inequality can only grow. Let me explain myself. We've got some business enterprises, and I'm very careful not to generalize here, that cause environmental impact reports to be presented to government in compliance with the regulatory framework. Their businesses are allowed to operate in certain communities. I'm not too sure whether it's as a result of laziness or whether it's as a result of a plan, that implementation is not allowed to happen, or enforcement is not allowed to happen, the result is your cyclone Idai and any other devastating cyclone that you can think of. It happens even in South Africa. Our environment is highly toxified. People are suffering, particularly the poor. They are the victims in this country and everywhere else whenever the damage that we cause to our environment as a result of our insatiable appetite for money remains uncontrolled, unchecked. You can't talk about social solidarity and sacrifice in any meaningful way without factoring into that value or that consideration, human life. I don't know how I would be able to live with myself if I undertake to improve the lives of the people in a community within which I operate and yet do nothing more than a semblance of compliance with my social responsibilities to the community whose minerals I'm mining or in whose land I'm running my industry. So, I think all the harm that has happened to humanity and the land we live in demands of each and every one of us to reflect on just when are we going to be in a position to sacrifice? Not much, can still enjoy a lot of profit without allowing human life to be compromised as much as it has been in South Africa and elsewhere in pursuit of more and more and more money. I think we would all do well to reflect on, is it the former owner of Apple said, there was a message of his that was making the rounds in social media. But the bottom line was, with all the 7 billion American dollars that he is worth, he has come to terms with a reality lying on his sick bed, that there is more to life than money. Money is good. I want to have it, but not at the expense of other people's lives. Whether they are my relatives or not is neither here nor there. Think about corruption, think about fraud, think about robbery, think about anything. Foundational to that harmful practice or conduct is greed. You want to take from another, even if it might be the only thing they have. You don't care. You want to take that car that they are driving, even if it might be the only one they have and need to run their small business so they can survive. You don't care. The principle is the same. It doesn't matter at what level of greed you have graduated to or you operate. The bottom line is you're just driven by greed. You can't get enough of it. Social solidarity and sacrifice demands of all of us. If what Indlulamithi, this project is all about, is to be implemented, I think we need to move from a theoretical perspective to a more practical approach to the challenges that confront us. There's got to be values that we not just talk about, but that we teach at home. Most of the problems that we have, whether it is crime, whether it is tribalism, ethnicity, racism, gender discrimination, xenophobia, would have been significantly reduced, I believe, had we made it our business as early as 1994. To say, you know, one of our problems was racism, and we were made to despise one another on the basis of the tribe that we belong to. That is why we had these many homelands. What are we going to do in a programmatic way to uproot this thing, because it's not going to be taken out of our society or lives by the mere fact that we have a highly progressive constitution in place. But it's never too late. Ways must be sought of capacitating parents, early learning centers, primary schools, any institution of learning, so that we at least make it our business and we can look back 5, 10 years to come on how far our project of ensuring that values that are critical to peaceful coexistence, hatred for crime and corruption, have been instilled in our children and in us. It's never too late. If adults can meet for the first time different racial groups and marry, I think we've got to be learning from those people, those of us who have maybe subconscious prejudice. And it does cut across both ways. I'll never believe that it's impossible for a black person to be a racist. It may not be possible to oppress economically, but you may be a racist. I cite an example quite often of some people that I was with in Australia. We entered the lift. As we left, I said, "Oh, I didn't greet this white lady." So these people are the same. Even if we had greeted her, she would never have responded. And then we got to another lift. We were first to get in. We were 3. A white lady comes and says, "Hi, guys." So I look at them. So these people are the same. Values. If you were to be asked, what values define the people of South Africa? What would you say? Not those that are supposed to, but those that actually define them. You go to Japan, you go to China. They've got their mistakes like all of us. Go to Rwanda. Go to Ethiopia now because of a new leader. The difference is evident. So we've got to be more practical about the values that needs to be instilled. We need to talk more, I think, about our educational system. Why do we have education? What are we teaching? This one that you can pass with 30%. Where are we seeking to go? And what is it that has convinced us that in the manner we go about things, we will get there? What do we prioritize? Do we really prioritize science and technology? Since there's talk about fourth industrial revolution, and it's a good discussion. But what is it that we are doing in a practical and informed way to facilitate the attainment of that noble or laudable objective? Crime and corruption. Why do we have so much crime? Is it because of poverty, inequality, and so on and so on? Do the police have the skills they need to do their job? Who trains them? Where was he or she trained? What track record is there to show that this is a person with the capacity to train? Do you have enough of them? Why are they committing suicide? How are those challenges being addressed so that they are a happy people who are not frustrated by a call that says, "There's trouble here, please come and help"? Are we talking about this absence of vehicles that they need to move from one place to the other? What mechanisms are there to ensure that the rotten apples are rooted out? Are we talking about it? Or are we very selective in identifying topics that needs to be discussed? Do we allow some thinkers out there to do the thinking for us, and we lazily allow ourselves to think about what others think we ought to be thinking about? We are thought leaders, and you can never be a thought leader if all you ever do is check what is in the newspapers, what is on television, what is on Twitter. Where is your own originality? When are we ever going to read about not what you are channeled to think about, but something completely new and original that would help us to find practical solutions to the challenges that confront us? I think part of the problem is, part of the reason why I think there isn't much change is that we keep on doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Who ever talks in a more meaningful way about strikes by teachers at a time when children ought to be taught? In a constructive way, seeking even to engage those who are involved to understand where they come from. How much do we soberly reflect on the quality of those who teach our children? Because it must be a criminal offense for somebody who can get my child to read or write to be teaching and getting paid for that. A child can't read after having been in class for an hour. What have you been doing? And how are we going to address that? Good people, I know you are all highly intellectual people. You read big books. But believe you me, it is very basic solutions that are going to get us somewhere. Something like, why does government not have money? Forget about the stealing part. Why does government not have money? Well, I understand that there are many who are stealing. I don't have the evidence. I work on the basis of evidence. A colleague of mine who is a judge president almost arrived late at a meeting, one of these meetings that I convene from time to time of the leaders of the judiciary. So I said to him, oh, so even your blue lights couldn't help you? I mean, when really there's a need as judge president, you should at least switch them on. He says, I don't have them. I said, what happened? He said, I decided to find out first how much it would cost if I were to pay from my pocket for these blue lights. They said 12,000. I said, how much would it cost if the state were to do it for me, as they are supposed to? They said 88,000. And that was quite sobering, because it is not just about blue lights. There are many buildings that the state ought to be owning now, that they are still paying rental for, because it benefits some people for these long leases to continue. I have heard of a person who had nothing, signed a 10-year lease agreement with a particular department in a particular province, and a guarantee to take to the bank to say, this man has nothing, but we guarantee to pay if only you can lend him money to buy a building. Bought a building. Within a year or 6 months, the building was paid up. For the balance of the 10 years, the state is paying. How much money would we be saving so that we can address those critical challenges that the state doesn't have money for? At national level, provincial, local government, there are buildings that are leased to the state at shockingly high prices. I'm not trying to take people out of business, but I think, considering that the Minister of Finance told us, was it last year or earlier this year, that we borrow 10 billion rands every day, I think we should be approaching those people and saying, please, you know our situation. Let's determine the market value we want to pay. This thing must come to an end now. We are going to own it. We will refurbish it ourselves. A pen to government is worth probably 5 or 10 times more than it is worth to you as an individual. Why can't we talk about these things and put an end to them? I raised them at some stage with my counterparts at the right level. To be precise, I raised them with the president and the heads of parliament. I said, we're wasting a lot of money by leasing buildings in circumstances where we don't have money to lease them. Even tenders. We talk about unemployment, inequality, poverty. Why should one individual get a tender for 100 million when there are so many who are unemployed? Can't we develop a strategy, even if it is with the facilitation of the NYDA, I think it is? Groom people. Let them form close corporations or associations or something. A number of young people, prepare them for future possibilities. When there is a tender that runs into so many millions, let it be awarded to this association. They can even be supervised so that nobody wants to hurriedly buy a BMW after the tender. And let there be sharing. Why should one individual get a billions worth of tender under these circumstances? Why can't there be a radical paradigm shift for the sake of the unemployed, some of whom are even graduates? I think a more pragmatic approach is called for in the manner that we do things. At some point, I think we must be bold enough to say that social grants are unsustainable. We've got to get to the point where we can't just abandon people, but we've got to think about how do you separate those who truly can't survive without social grants from those who could work, if only opportunities for them to work rather than wait for social grants were created. We may inadvertently be creating another nation that will forever be dependent on what they are given by the state without any incentive to reach out to that talent, that potential that is lying dormant within, to either start a small business or till the soil. I think I may have spoken for a long time, but let me just touch on unity. People, I think the time has come for us to be united as a nation. Remember, one of the reasons why our people were killing each other was disunity. We allowed race and ethnicity to divide us, and many lost their lives. The collective wisdom that is here, and in many other gatherings that happen every week, is able to come up with a solution through which we could address the disunity that seems to reign in this country. Strategies. How do we create platforms for us to ventilate our frustrations and anger at each other? Allow people to even swear at each other in a room like this. Let them take it out so that you know how to approach this problem, so that you know what programs to craft, so that this thing can be more meaningfully dealt with. But we are running away from it because it's highly sensitive. I think the time has come for us to creatively confront this thing on a daily basis. It doesn't help having one meeting after the other talking. We've got to leave every meeting saying, okay, as an individual, what am I going to do? Who am I going to talk to about these problems? What about gender-based violence? What is it that we can do? What are the faith-based organizations doing? How do we challenge them to assume this critical responsibility that they ought to have assumed a long time ago, but they seem to be dilly-dallying around it? So, the police, prosecuting authority, the judiciary, And by the way, all institutions need to be capacitated to do their work. Let's go deeper and check what exactly are the problems there, so that even as we criticize, it's not at a superficial level. We grapple with the challenges that confront them. We know what is it that renders it difficult for them to do what they are supposed to do, and come up with constructive suggestions to address these problems. The media must be challenged, I think, to feature the solution bearers that are here from time to time, to share with the nation what is it that each and every one of us could do to help solve the problem. And let me conclude by saying we must own up to the individual and collective responsibility that rests on our shoulders. It's a great country. I'm told, well, reading a book, Dare Not Linger, by Mandla Langa about Mandela. Part of what President Mandela says there is this. When he came into government, we owed 245 billion rands, among other debts. Then he was approached by the managing director of the World Bank, I think it was the World Bank, said we can lend you money under very wonderful circumstances. Consulted then Deputy President Mbeki and others, they said no ways. But the long and short of the story is, I was reliably informed that when President Mbeki stepped down, we were in positive territory, so to speak. That's leadership for you. But something happened. I don't know how much we owe now. But it can be reversed if we all have the willpower to say uncomfortable things without meaning harm. You know, when a person is genuine in their criticism, it'll hit you hard because that nerve has been touched. But when you are alone, it'll dawn on you that this person really wasn't attacking me. The person is challenging me to do things differently so that we can take our people and our country and our continent and the global community forward. So I think we must stop assuming that government has all the answers. They don't. They are ordinary human beings like you and I. But if we come up with these solutions and sell to them, and in every platform that we are privileged to speak from, share some ideas. Some will be rejected or all may be rejected, but ultimately, some of them will be appreciated and people will run with them. So may we leave this meeting determined in our small spaces, in our circles of influence, to be difference makers. May we refuse to be led by negativity. May we have a vision that is so superior that not even a tree, however tall, can obscure. Hold on to it. You will never run short of people who are well-meaning, who are right-thinking, who love this country, who love fellow human beings, who understand even when people are mean to them, that it's part of human nature. You'll come across people who are determined to embrace anything that can move us forward. I think it will be a great shame if this rich country, this beautiful country, goes down and we think we can blame others for it. You and I have what it takes to salvage this country from destruction and to ensure that our country is never labeled as yet another African country. There's nothing wrong about being an African country, but there is everything wrong about greed, about criticizing always but never coming up with solutions that can take us forward, about the love for power and fame, because you will always pursue anything, however immoral it may be, as long as you may be remembered when high positions or favors become available. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I hope I didn't insult you. I hope I've encouraged you. Thank you.